Hello, and welcome to today's Cuyahoga County press briefing. Today, we are joined by County Executive Armond Budish, Justice Center Steering Committee's owner representative, Jeff Applebaum, and County Municipal Advisor and Managing Director of Stiefel Public Finance, Bob France. We will begin by hearing from our speakers and then end with some questions. Just a reminder to the media to please remain muted during speakers. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to Executive Budish.
Thank you, Devin. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. In 2019, the Justice Center Steering Committee was created. This committee, which is comprised of 12 representatives from the county council, the Common Pleas Court, City of Cleveland, and the prosecutor's office, has been working diligently to determine the best, most impactful future for our corrections center. What the committee determined was that a new jail was needed. I don't think there's anyone that would deny that we need a new jail. Our current jail is not appropriate to serve the needs of Cuyahoga County. A new correction center would be more efficient and effective, and it would comply with all statutory mandates. Today, we're going to let you know how we plan to fund this new correction center. Please understand that the information we'll provide today is still preliminary, since we just hired the criteria architect, and this plan must still be considered by council as well. I'm happy to have Jeff Applebaum and Bob France here with me today. Jeff will go first. He's the Managing Director of Project Management Consultants. He's been the Justice Center Steering Committee owner's representative, and he's going to talk about why we desperately need a new jail, what it could look like, and what it's likely to cost. Jeff?
Thank you, Armond. So I don't think there's much dispute about the fact that we need a new facility. The current jails have been extensively studied since 2013. It started with the facilities assessment report, a facilities planning report, multiple investigations by members of our programming team comparing renovation versus build new options, versus even do nothing options. And all of this information has been presented in a series of public meetings, multiple studies and presentations, and ultimately the determination by the steering committee through a unanimous vote was that we needed construction of a new jail on a new site without further delay. And by the way, when we talk about a new jail, it's a correction center. It doesn't just include a jail. It also includes sheriff's administration, parking, and other features. So why did the committee come to this conclusion? Why have all the studies come to this conclusion? Well, essentially, it's about comparing different options. A do-nothing option, the option of renovating, the option of building new. We know from all the studies done that the cost just to fix what is broken without making any operational or programmatic upgrades would exceed in 2020 dollars $304 million. And that's based on taking the original studies, updating them for current cost. And this was all, by the way, in a steering committee last November. You can look and see the detail of all this. And keep in mind, this is with the difficulty of renovating a fully occupied building. You would actually have to move inmates out, move them around, and fix areas while you are trying to do construction, a very difficult process. But that process, even if we did it and completed it, the result would be buildings that have not changed operationally or programmatically. They would still be highly inefficient. You can't, for example, change the number of cells in every housing unit in jail 1. You can't change the adjacencies of, for example, recreation and housing areas. You can't really improve in any dramatic way inmate movement or fundamental intake processes. So we would end up with a facility that the pieces and parts that are broken would be fixed, but operationally it would still be inadequate and wouldn't meet modern standards. Moreover, you can't take those buildings and make them more flexible to accommodate either increases or decreases in future jail population. They simply don't work for a number of reasons after extensive study. Also, the cost of doing nothing and delaying, you can't really kick this problem down the road. The studies have shown that costs us about $45 million a year to do that. So what are the benefits of building new? First of all, the buildings that we create would be operationally far more efficient. Current studies indicate that at a minimum, we'd have savings of $9 million a year just in terms of the enhanced operations of a new building. More importantly, I think, though, we'd be creating a far safer, more secure, and healthier environment for both the inmates and the staff, with many operational and programmatic advantages. There'd be better outcomes for the inmates, better outcomes for the justice system, and a far more attractive environment for hiring and retaining the best correction staff. All of these are critical goals which would be very difficult, if not impossible, to meet in the existing buildings if we renovated them. The new facility would also be far more flexible in terms of housing units that could be added on a modular basis. You can't take the current building and really, in any easy way, either downsize it or create significantly more opportunity for housing. It is a fixed structure. So with that in mind, what are we talking about doing right now? We are going forward. The current budget that we have set for the project is in the range of $525 to $550 million. Now, this is dependent on a lot of factors that obviously are still somewhat unknown. One of them is site acquisition. We have not yet acquired the site. We're working on the site review process, but the costs will vary depending on the site and the costs associated with the site. The initial number of housing units to be constructed, it still has to be finally determined. We know the steering committee has said that we're going to start with not less than 1,600. It would be expandable to 2,400. We obviously want to build this with as few housing units as we can, but we obviously also have to accommodate growth trends. So the final number of housing units, at least initially, that we're going to build will have an impact on where we end up with the budget. And finally, construction market conditions. We all know, and we've all read stories about wild swings right now in price, cost and availability of labor, shortages, materials. Hopefully that's going to stabilize as we move through the pandemic, but that's also an unknown. That's why we have contingencies in the budget. So what is the current status of the project right now? The criteria architect is fully engaged. The design builder selection is actually underway. We issued the RFQ for the design builder on Monday of this week. So we will have a design builder within the next few months. And the schedule calls for getting to a guaranteed maximum price in about 10 months with a fully designed design development being completed. And right now we are still anticipating project completion in 2025, dependent upon, of course, upon our ability to acquire and get control of the site. So that's really why we need a jail and what we're doing right now.
Center. To fund this project, we will seek County Council approval to extend the existing 1/4% sales tax, which is now primarily paying the bonds in connection with the Convention Center, the Global Center, and the hotel. Those bonds will be paid off in 2027. I have here with me Bob France, Stifel's Public Finance Managing Director and the county's financial advisor. He'll talk about the cost and how this is going to be funded. Bob?
Thank you, Armond. Thank you. Similar to many other large-scale projects the county has successfully undertaken in the past, and very similar to many other local governments in Ohio and across the country, the financing plan for the jail project includes the issuance of bonds. The extension of the 1/4% sales tax will be the primary repayment source for paying debt service charges on the bonds, along with expected operational savings from the new facility. The numbers on the table here are estimates only, and I stress that. These are estimates. They will change. That's the beauty of estimates. They will change. So these are estimates only. There are many moving parts that not only impact the project, that will ultimately impact the financing plan, as Jeff laid out, but there are many other factors, such as the state of the fixed income municipal market at the time of issuing the bonds, how federal laws could impact the municipal market going forward, federal and state statute impacting financing plan as it pertains to the project and the schedule, and many other factors. Until the sales tax extension begins to generate revenues in 2028, additional funding from other lawfully available funds at the county will be necessary to fund debt service charges during that time. Current estimates place that number at approximately 30 million. Again, this is an estimate, but it's what we're working with at this time. The financing plan is structured to limit risk to the county and to limit debt service until 2028, when sales tax revenues would be available to produce revenues available for debt service. Currently, we're estimating annual debt service costs of approximately 35 million beginning in 2028. All of these numbers assume a $550 million budget for the project. So it is on the upward side of what Jeff mentioned before. But again, it's an estimate only. While the $35 million number is certainly large, there's no debating that. For context, though, the 0.25% sales tax generated approximately $52 million in 2020. Many details regarding the bonds will be ironed out and presented to council for approval. But the information here, it's estimates of the current plan and what we're working with at this time. I'll now turn it back over to Devin for any questions or further comments.
Thank you all for your remarks. We now have a few minutes for some questions. Please state your name and media organization when asking a question, and remember to stay muted, please, when not speaking. So we can take a question, please.
Hi there, this is Courtney Asalfi with the Plain Dealer in Cleveland.com. I don't think I caught this in your guys' remarks, but please correct me if I'm wrong. How long are you seeking to extend the sales tax? Is it a 20-year extension?
Right now, we're looking at an indefinite, no closing date.
A permanent. Okay. All right. And then I'm wondering, excess revenues from the sales tax extension. What do you plan to do with the money that's not needed for the jail? Any excess revenues?
Having the additional funds, one, gives us the flexibility in case the budget does need to be adjusted, especially if the population gets out of hand. But one significant benefit for having those additional funds is that we have other capital projects that we're currently considering, and we will be able to use those funds as needed for those additional projects. One that we're starting to talk about tomorrow is the courts towers as part of the Justice Center. Whether we rehab them or move them, the fact is that they'll be very expensive.
All right. And, I'm curious about the projections that Bob threw out there. I'm wondering if those projections on revenues from this extension, sales tax revenues have increased, a small percentage every year, pretty routinely, not every year, but most years since this was imposed. And I'm wondering, does Bob's projections account for those year-over-year routine increases?
Bob?
Yeah, Courtney, we're not, as of this time, the numbers we're using are not including any growth at all.
Okay, so just based off like the 52 million number from 2020?
Correct.
All righty. And then I also have another question for the executive. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that following the State of the County address, you were specifically asked whether you would be proposing raising taxes to pay for a new jail. I understand that this is an extension, not a fresh tax, but the fact remains is that people will be paying more starting in 28 and definitely going forward. So can you please address, maybe the discrepancy between your pledge back at the state of the county and this new plan now?
There is no discrepancy, Courtney. The fact is that this is an extension. This is not an increase. So the fact that in 2028 people will be paying a sales tax which is no higher than what they're paying now or what they've been paying. There's no increase to this funding, and it's no different than when school districts pass a renewal levy. Nobody ever, they're assuming it's not truly more than what the prior levy was. It's a renewal. It's an extension. It's not an increase in taxes.
All right. The fact that it's running, it's a permanent increase, it wasn't pitched that way back when it was implemented in 2007. It was 20 years for a specific project. And now we're potentially looking at a permanent rate here.
Every school district that passes a levy, it's a particular amount of time, and it's set to expire. But when it's renewed, it's renewed. It's not an increase.
All right. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from any other media on the call? Okay, well, thank you for your questions. That's all the time we have today. Please reach out if you have any additional questions and we'll get those answered for you. Thank you for joining us and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.